Hey everybody, thank you so much for tuning back in. Today I'm going to be going over how I fit guards to knives, and there are several ways you can go about it, but this particular method works well for me, and I'll show you guys how I do it. So here is a piece of Mokume Gane that I forged out from some US quarters, and a blade made from A8 Mod tool steel. Forged that out a couple of weeks ago. This little guy right here is called a file guide, and it's two pieces of steel with two pieces of carbide on top. And the carbide is so hard that a file cannot bite into it, and therefore it makes a nice crisp line forming the shoulder of the blade. Let's just tighten these guys down right here. Make sure everything is lined up exactly where we want it to be. We don't want to take off too much material, just enough to make everything squared away the way that it should be in order to have a nice fit with the guard. And as you can see, it's just very minimal material that we're taking off here, not much. We're going to start off using a rather aggressive file, making some long strokes with it, and that'll remove the meat of the material. And then we'll get into using a more fine grit file to fine tune that, as you'll see here in just a second. As you can see here, we have flattened it out to be perfectly flat across the top with that carbide. And now we're going to mark out on our guard where we want our scribe lines to be so that we can have the tang fit through exactly where it should. So I'm using some Sharpie and some calipers, measuring how wide the top of the tang is, and then just scribing two lines right across where they need to be. And that gave us our center line and our two point lines at the end there. Now we're measuring the thickness and finding the perfectly sized drill bit. Not perfectly sized really, we actually want a slightly smaller drill bit, that way we can file away some material. Now we're just drilling away at those holes that I punched out and getting rid of the rest of the material in there, and we'll be connecting those holes with files later on. So I don't have a mill, but this is my redneck version of a mill. Alright, now we're going to be using the files. So I've got a very small round chainsaw file. I'm using that to be the main connector of the holes. So there's a little bit of a gap between each hole right now where there's still metal. So we're trying to remove that, get it out of the way, and eventually we'll have a very ugly looking hole, but we'll be able to use a slightly larger file and take away more material at once, and everything will start to go a little bit faster once we get done with that. So we're moving on to a flat file to bump those ridges down and get everything down to parallel as it should be. And we'll start working on getting the actual tang fitted to it here in just a minute. So we're just doing a little bit of a test fit right now. It's actually closer than I thought it would be, so not much more left to take out, and I do want it to be a press fit, so I want to be able to hammer that guard on there and have it be really tight. And what I'm doing now is I test fitted it off camera, and I'm tapping around it, closing those gaps and actually pushing some of that Mokume towards the center. then using the hydraulic press to squeeze it shut. And that looked really close, so now I'm just flattening off those little hammer marks that I put on there. And then we are going to see how this fits and do a little bit of fine tuning. Here I'm using some 220 grit sandpaper just to flatten off the surface, give it a nice finish, and that'll really kind of illuminate any gaps or imperfections that might be in the fit up. So we want to see how we did so far. I've got that piece of leather in the vise to make sure that I don't scratch my blade up, and the second piece of leather on the tang to make sure that I don't destroy my guard trying to beat it on there. And here it is. This is just about as close as I can get it with the tools that I have, and once I sand it down, those little bumps will disappear, but that is very, very seamless.